We're going to pick up on a couple of big issues about water decarbonisation, first of all, and then how you build resilient systems. Yesterday we were talking about resilient infrastructure. Let's get the guests up, because, and I should tell you that we will have the Director of Climate and Water Sustainability for Coca-Cola, not on this session, but the next session after we've discussed water decarbonisation. Joining us on the platform, Jonquil, welcome. Jonquil Hackenberg, who's Head of Sustainability and Climate Response for PA Consulting. Dave Smith, welcome Dave, Director Central Technology and Strategy for Rolls-Royce, and Franz Besnick, who's Global Head of Sustainable Innovation for P&G. I think there's one sobering fact that we all need to bear in mind as we use our washing machines or go for a glass of water or just go to a tap and hope there's a shower and water coming out of it. The world will face a water deficit of up to 40% by 2030. That's not 8:30 tonight, that is 8 years from now. 1/3, 33% of leaders surveyed in PA's Water and Carbon Report were either not at all aware or only slightly aware of the relationship between water and carbon. Well, for 20 minutes, we want that to be the focus of a wake-up call to you about the challenges of water and decarbonisation. Jonquil, why don't you take away the findings of your report and open it up to your colleagues?
Thank you very much. So yes, what's really interesting around water has been kind of a consequence and not necessarily considered in this whole net zero journey. And so we decided to do a report to understand decarbonisation and water and the correlation between those two things. And as we move towards the hydrogen economy and moving away from fossil fuels. Sorry, I'm spinning around this chair.
Just put the microphone a little closer to you as well.
Okay. And so as we looked at that, we looked at the correlation between those things and also looked at if we were to lead on water rather than on carbon for certain industries, the drinks industry, for example, being one, what impact could that have? And actually, it's seismic and dramatic. I'd love to hear your perspectives on water and carbon from maybe we start with Efriends. Because you're also focused on
could I
this.
just, before you come in, there are 3 questions you've set yourselves. How can organizations innovate at scale to reduce water use and carbon emissions? Secondly, how can organizations build strategic partnerships and alliances across supply chains? And thirdly, how do you keep customers top of mind and engaged throughout this innovation process?
Maybe I'll go one at a time. And I'll start with the last one because, so I'm representing P&G, but I'm representing the 50-liter home coalition. And 50-liter home is both an inspiration and an ambition. The inspiration came from Cape Town. Day zero was approaching. It was about 3 years ago. And people were constrained overnight from about 120 liters per day per person to 50 liter right there, brutally. No chance, no innovation, nothing. I went there on the ground to live life at 50 liter per day per person when there's no innovation and spend a week with people. I've seen beautiful long-haired women cutting their hair because it's easier to cut your hair than wash your hair when you just have 10 liters worth of water. People would preciously keep the water from the water effluent, bring it over the washing machine, run the washing machine, then take that effluent yet again, second time, bring it over to clean surfaces, clean floor, push the water up to the garden, and save that last bucket they were allowed for one flush a day. That's really answering how you actually look at consumer centricity. This was the place of inspiration. Coming off of that week came the aha moments like, what if, instead of doing like Cape Town that was forced to doing it, instead of putting people on the 50 and wonder how we can make people live on 50 liters per day per person, how about we're going to shift that paradigm around? How we can make homes of tomorrow that run at 50 liters per day per person, but they feel like 500 liters at zero carbon. So hopefully that gives a glimpse of the answers, how you actually got to be almost living it yourself, make it very consumer-centric, and of course turn that into an ambition. And then later I'm happy to talk about what do you do with that in terms of a coalition forming.
So that's really powerful. I came at this from a different way, but I think that sort of human story says why this is so important. So I thought it was a great report, and when I read it, 2 things came out for me. One is As we go through this energy transition, this global energy transition, who gets which resource? That's not easy, and how to manage that is also not easy. And the other thing is, what new partnerships do we need to deliver this? Because the old order isn't going to do it. We need to do things differently. So as a technologist, I look at this and how do we decarbonize? And looking back over the last sort of century or so, we've had one answer for where the energy comes from. It's fossil fuels, and they're ubiquitous, and they're brilliant, except I should also mention nuclear, particularly as my boss made an announcement this morning about small modular reactors, but there's enough of my colleagues talking about that, and I can't get a water story out of it, so I'm going to move on rapidly.
There is a cooling issue.
There is a cooling issue, yes.
And where you locate them.
We could absolutely do that, and I would get plaudits back at the ranch, but I don't think we should. It's not the purpose of this. So I think one of the things that comes out is, whereas we had one source of energy, now we're going to have a multiplicity of energies, and they're going to appear in different parts of the world at different times, and there's going to be different solutions. And that's completely new, and we've never had to manage that before. We've never needed a sort of systems engineering model for the whole planet before, and we probably do now. And I think an event like COP is where we can start to talk across countries, across boundaries, across sectors, and start to balance off those things. And I can start to talk about, in aviation, where would we use a lot of electricity instead of water? And we've got to balance green electricity versus water. What choices should we make? Jonquil.
And just to build on some of that, and just looking at these kind of unlikely partnerships between different industries, I think that's what's going to be interesting coming out of this COP, is these unlikely partnerships. If you look at supply chains that are water intensive in different parts of the supply chain, either they are the products such as the drinks industry, or they contribute largely to the product like the microchips industry. The point is, water's needed. And if you start to look at geographical areas, particularly by the coast, there's water-stressed areas of the world. If those unintentional, unlikely partnerships across such industries were to collaborate to understand how they could use green technology solutions from water that also has a symbiotic relationship in reducing the amount of energy that's used either to produce the water in the first place or to clean the water at the end, be extremely powerful. So I guess our observation in all of this is, as you're looking at a sustainability strategy or you're looking at a climate response strategy, net zero cannot just be about energy. It can't just be about decarbonisation at all. It has to be about water and waste and the link between those three things. And it has to be a consideration across value chains that are both belonging to your own value chain but also interacting with others as we look at those water-stressed areas of the world.
Yeah, and in the case of 58 homes, I totally agree, Jonquil. In the case of 58 homes, there was intentionality in the coalition we formed. Because when you say that, when you declare you've got a 58 home that makes homes living at 50 liters, that feels like 500 liters at zero carbon, then I'm a P&G company. I'm selling, detergents and soap and shampoo. So I am actually the last piece of connection between the consumer and the waste streams. P&G would never claim to be that company, but that's what we're doing. We are that last piece of connection to the consumer. The rest is sewage. But then we need a systems change. And what we've done really is look around over the entire value chain. So it was a very intentional search for who do we need to close the entire value chain of water and energy. So we look for partners inside the homes. And Kohler, who does bathroom infrastructures, joined. We looked for appliances in kitchen and laundry. Electrolux is joined. And we said we need to work the outside, because once you change the outside systems, you're going to have to adapt the inside system. You're going to have to adapt the outside system. So who do we need? ENGIE for the energy, Suez for the water, Arcadis as one of the partners for the engineering infrastructure in urban cities. Then we looked at what are the public partners. Mayor Kate Gallego, Mayor of Phoenix, US, just declared last week here at COP26 that she's joining as a public co-chair of the coalition, so that we can partner with cities. And we've got water reuse associations and other announcements to be made later this week. So this was, in this case, a very intentional build of partnerships across the value chain so we can hold hands and say, how are we going to reinvent the systems change inside and outside the homes and partner with cities so we can drive pilots and learn on the ground to actually help scale this up.
I think that's brilliant. That whole value chain is the real issue for us now. And again, looking at something like power or aviation, which is a form of power, we now need to start thinking about what fuel's going to be available, because that changes the way you turn that fuel into something useful, whether it's motion or electricity or heat or whatever it is. And you need to know what fuels are going to be out there. And when you start looking at that, you say, well, okay, for aircraft batteries, that's not going to be the answer except for sort of local flying taxis and short hops around islands. But we have a choice. We could potentially use hydrogen. That will get you quite a long way. Won't get you from here to Hong Kong or Australia, but it'll get you around Europe quite nicely, potentially. There's some real challenges to overcome, but maybe. But we could certainly use sustainable fuels. And then we look at sustainable fuels and say, well, hydrogen, making that's going to require a lot of green electricity. We'd need, if we're going to use hydrogen to decarbonise the UK, for example, we need to double or triple the amount of green electricity we make. Is that the right solution? If we're going to use bioenergy, then we'd have to double the amount of water we use. Is that the right solution? And these are really big, tricky challenges that we've got to make decisions about. And when you're in a business and you've got to work out what are we going to sell to our customers, our consumers, you've got to second guess that. And to do that, you've got to work with those people who are going to make those fuels. Is hydrogen going to be available? Are sustainable fuels going to be available? If they are they going to be made out of air and water and green electricity, which we can do, e-fuels? Are they going to be made out of agricultural residue, which you can do? There's some really good ways of doing that. We can make it out of municipal waste. You know, you can take rubbish and make kerosene out of it effectively. So we have choices, and I can solve for my industry brilliantly and be proud of myself, and then find the next industry, whether it's maritime or cement, they need the same resources. And I've just assumed I get them all because I've got a difficult problem to solve and I've solved it. Look at me, aren't I clever? Unfortunately, other people need the same resources. And I think water's a critical one in that.
I think that's a really brilliant point, and it substantiates everything that, you know, you can't just write sustainability strategies for net zero decarbonisation, as you've just highlighted. I think also just in the opportunity for consumers, whether you are a B2B or a B2C, ultimately we're all consumers, so we all are trying to solve for this climate crisis in our own industries and our own respective jobs. And I think water presents us with an opportunity for us to actually really understand tangibly what decarbonisation and what net zero means, because carbon's very hard for the average person to understand, yet everybody understands water. So I think one opportunity we have is explaining the water footprint as well as the carbon footprint of all that which we consume, whether it's services or products. And I think understanding that and the correlation across the value chain is really, really critical. And I think that is also the opportunity for partnership to actually make a change.
Just on that point, believe it or not, a third of my job is to spend time with consumers. That's what I do. And of course, in COVID time, that doesn't happen, meaning physically. So I'm just off. I've started research, online research, and I'm just closing a research with friends about 2 weeks, 2 hours with the consumers in their homes. They photograph their place, they understand, they tell me what they're using, they photograph their washing machines, etc. What I can tell you is 2 things. People do not know how much water they use. It's a blank space. And do they want to know? Oh no. Why? Because there's so many other issues in the homes. Parents being sick, kids not doing well at school, can't pay the bills, energy prices up. So when you talk about, let's really make you aware of how much water we use, I mean, that's the last thing we want to do. That's point number 1. Point number 2, zero carbon? It's like, what are you talking about? Like, is there carbon in my water? Like, I didn't know that. Yeah, you're kind of heating your water to take a shower, right? Or to, to turn your laundry, and yeah. But these connections are absolutely not happening. And so I would say, that's my motto, and that's what I do at P&G, and that's what I really believe in. I'm in the business to make sustainable irresistible. Consumers are not ready to talk sustainability. Some are, and that's great. It makes my job much easier. But I'm starting with the assumption and the baseline that what I'm seeing is absolutely true with many consumers I'm visiting around the world. We've got to make sustainable irresistible. Sustainability is too complex. It's already complex for us. Find solutions that are absolutely irresistible, and they'll actually buy them like there's no tomorrow. It took a couple of years to have the humanity adopting a smartphone. So if you make things really irresistible, it goes fast. Here's the point. When you apply that to laundry, so they actually were with me for 2 weeks and talking about their issues and not worrying about water and not worrying about zero carbon. I said, let's do a test. Let's actually go and do cold washing on laundry for a week. Oh, why, you wish it's not going to work, etc. I said, let's do it. Let's all do it. And so we went into a challenge. At the end of the week, all what they were absolutely thrilled about is, oh my God, this was so faster than my usual cleaning task. It takes half the time because short cycles, etc. That's what people need. What are the solutions that resolve true pain points? And then you can stick whatever sustainability tags to it. But we need to solve for real pain points of consumers in their homes. Otherwise, we're going to make too slow progress.
We've got 5 minutes to run. Let me just jump in. There are a couple of questions here, and particularly one of the points you made in the pre-discussion about how water use will impact others, and there not being enough consideration of that. Janice Beale has just posted the idea, how do you reconcile the generally decreasing availability of water with the competing water needs of domestic water consumption and water-thirsty industries? In other words, that issue of impact of water. You think you've got water, but what impact is it having on others, whether in the developing or developed world? Jonquil.
Yeah, so it's a brilliant point, and we're going to need more and more water as we urbanise further, the populations grow, and we're moving away from fossil fuels, and we're going towards the hydrogen economy, which requires more water, right? So what does that mean? That means two things. It means, one, we need to get access to more water, which we then need to look at our oceans and the impact on oceans. How do we do desalination in a viable green way using, for example, solar thermal energy rather than reverse osmosis, which uses a bunch of chemicals and a lot of energy? So that's one thing. So how do we get access to more water and not do damage in the process? And the second thing is, how do we reuse the water that we've got? So how do we treat wastewater in a green way? How do we use less water, as Franz was talking about? So there's kind of we need to use less for the things that we do. We don't even consider how we use water today in industry nor in our homes, unless you're in a disadvantaged part of the world where it becomes very prevalent. But these technologies and the ability to scale up these technologies is absolutely critical. So there's a lot of innovation happening in water, but they're in small pockets. And what we actually need to do is to be able to connect these solutions together. So green desalination connected with a more efficient irrigation system connected with a green wastewater treatment, and scale that up both from a financial perspective, but also from a technology perspective. If we keep dabbling in small pockets, we're not going to come up with the solutions we need, and that is absolutely critical to solve this.
David Grimes has just reinforced that. How does or will the consumer or individual know routinely how much water use they have been engaging in, how much water resources have been used? Should this be an important measure of success?
Do you want to take that? Yeah, I guess, I think for me, I've got two sayings: make sustainable irresistible, make invisible visible. We're going to have to bring that information to the hand of the consumer. Digital technology will probably be able to do that, and there's lots of digital tech inside and outside the home to actually help us do that. So that education is going to, I think digital will be a big player for that. Of course, as a coalition, we're going to create education campaigns. And for those education campaigns, combined with technologies in the homes that make people see things, will be hopefully engaging them and empowering them to look for better solutions.
The third question was how to keep customers top of mind and engaged throughout the innovation process. I've got to put to you that if the figure is 40% deficit by 2030, which is 8 years away, there's going to be a lot of shock out there about what water will be available. Quickly, if you can. I don't know who wants to come in. Dave?
Well, I'll come back to the fact that water is a problem or an opportunity in different parts of the world, and this is a global event, and it needs to be. And again, I'll sort of risk restating it. We used to have one solution to lots of our problems, and we've got to get rid of that one solution. Water isn't a massive problem in Glasgow, except sometimes there's too much of it. In sub-Saharan Africa, it's a big issue. So you actually are going to need different solutions in different parts of the world. Solar is, again, not great in some parts of the world. Wind is, etc., etc. Water is available in some parts of the world, not others. We need to start taking the availability of natural resources into account and enabling, rather than the sort of single globalized solution we tend to go for because it's very efficient, we need more local solutions, I think, on a sort of regional scale, driven by geography and driven by weather and driven by the availability of resources.
Is there one key word missing at the moment? Urgent. That it's got to be done quickly.
Well, 50 litre home is taking that with urgency, and we've set that target. It's insane. People are shocked because the world is about 200 to 500 liters per day per person. We are setting a tenfold decrease. This is the extreme parts of the world. I think the water and energy nexus is where we need a little more urgency. I think we can kill two birds with one stone, back to where we started, by saying 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the homes come from heating the water. We have a solution that can really kill two birds with one stone, and that water energy nexus needs more urgency of awareness and action to go drive those solutions faster.
Jonquil, last word.
Last word is, in this complexity lies the opportunity, and so tying these two things together is really the opportunity to kill multiple birds with one stone, I would say. Thank you.
But I would conclude from what I've heard, there isn't a lot of time. It may be an opportunity, but not a lot of time. Both, I think, all three of you are agreeing. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure it's only 20 minutes, but we've got a lot done. Jonquil, Dave and Frans, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.